as well as the president of this year's DeGroote Finance and Investment Council, which I know you and your Fidelity have had much involvement in. So thank you for that. But first off, just want to say congratulations on receiving the Wayne C. Fox Distinguished Alumni Award. The award's obviously DeGroote's highest honor. First question had on my end was, what does receiving such a distinguished award mean personally to you as well as professionally?
I'm very appreciative, very honored to win the award. I I do not I'm not the type of person that wins a lot of awards from academic institutions, so it feels kind of ironic in that way. But I think it's a very nice thing. I have met Wayne C. Fox once before in my life, and I was intrigued when he was the inaugural winner of this thing. And what's my buddy from Mackenzie? I saw he won it as well. I remember when he won it about 5, 6, 7 years ago. So it's nice to be part of that group of winners. And I think it's just a really nice thing the school does. I think it's a smart thing the school does. And not many schools do it that I'm aware of, and I think more schools should.
Yeah, 100%. Completely agree with you there. So thank you for that. Super helpful. Next question I had was looking back at your journey specifically on DeGroote and becoming president of Fidelity Investing Canada. What was the pivotal moment that shaped your career if you had to bottle it up into one or a few?
It's pretty hard to do that. I'm 64 years of age. I've been working since 83. So what's that, 41 years? There's been a lot of smaller pivotal moments, not one or two that you can distill it down to. But since you've asked, I will point out that I think for most of us, the toughest time, the scariest time, the riskiest time is the first decade we're out in the workforce. The academic institutions do a nice job of trying to prepare all of us for a lifetime of working. They teach us lots of things we need to know, but there's lots of things that an academic institution can't teach us that we need to know. And we learn those lessons the hard way. And I did. I learned lots of lessons the hard way when I was in my 20s. And it was only because I had this deep, deep, deep desire to be what we used to call a stockbroker that I persevered and got through all of those trials and tribulations and came out the other end still standing. But as I say, I learned lots of lessons in my 20s, and I think all of those things have stuck with me and helped me in the last 30 years of my career.
And you mentioned going through the trials and tribulations. Do you think, as somebody coming out of university, it's paramount to go through those trials and tribulations?
Well, I know for sure the schools are doing a much better job of preparing young people for work life than they did when I went through school 40 years ago. There's a great deal more emphasis on communication. We hire a lot of young people at Fidelity every year, and every year I'm amazed at how well they communicate. There's all sorts of different forms of communication, as you know, and all of these students come out so much better prepared than we were a generation or two ago. But I had to learn those lessons, and I did not have the grounding in communication that young people have today. I was bad, 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 bad at just about every aspect of communication. Didn't know it. It was a blind spot. And, fortunately, the people at Nesbitt Thompson saw it as I was going through the training program and were rather severe with me and, taught me some painful lessons, but I'm glad they did.
Yeah, could not agree more. Communication, even on the investment council, we know it's pretty big. Which leads me to my next question, which is something that I've obviously gone through leaving the investment council this year, but specifically to you, how has your time or how did your time at DeGroote influence your leadership style in both the professional direction?
Well, I think it grounded me in the basics of finance, which is good. That was very helpful. My history is I was a stock trading addict during my high school years. I was born in 1961. I bought my first stock when I was 13, when I was starting grade 9. And it just so happens that that was the fall of 1974. And it didn't matter what you bought in the fall of 1974, it was going to go up. And in fact, it didn't matter what you bought for the next 5 years, it was going to go up. So I bought a lot of stocks in those next 5 years and they all went up. And I thought I was a genius. And I just really wanted to be in the investment space. And I went to Laurier to do my undergrad in what they called honors business. And I assumed there would be lots of investing courses to take there, and there were not. There are now. Laurier's come a long way, but there were not then, and I was a little disappointed by that. And so I knew when I was finished at Laurier there was more to learn, and I was hungry to find a school that would teach me a little bit more about just basic investment concepts. And they didn't call them investing classes back in the day. They still called them finance. But I think I needed 12 credits at McMaster to get my MBA. And pretty sure I remember taking the first seven were all finance courses, and they were essentially all investment courses. And they just taught me a lot of the basic constructs you need to know to get started in this industry. And they kind of launched me on a lifetime of learning about actual investing rather than the crazy stuff I had been doing in my high school years.
Yeah, very good to hear. And maybe a second follow-up question to that is how would you describe your leadership philosophy today and maybe one or two ways you think it's developed over the years?
Well, I'm a serious believer in collaboration. I always have been. Maybe I learned that at both Mac and Laurier, or maybe it was just in me. I don't know. Or maybe it's a function of all the places I've worked. I've worked at Nesbitt, I've worked at TD, I've worked at Fidelity. They're all very collaborative types of places. But the older I get, the more senior positions I take on, the more I'm reminded that I'm a better manager when I'm more collaborative. Specific example I would give you way back when, call it, I don't know, 20 years ago, I became the president of Fidelity Investments Canada. And once a week, we have a senior executive team meeting. And in my early days of being president, I thought I was supposed to know all the answers. If we'd go into a 2 hour meeting, there'd be two or three big issues that we would be discussing. And I thought to myself, I think I need to figure this out before I go into that meeting so I know what outcome I'm looking for in that meeting. And I was kind of quickly disabused of that crazy notion. It was obvious to me after working with those people for 6 months that it was my job to back away and let them discuss it because the group was way smarter than I ever was. The group had perspectives that I had no idea about. And if I just let that group do the discussing, I was always amazed at how quickly we got to a good answer. I was always amazed at how often we took a good idea and made it a much better idea. I was always amazed at how often we took an idea that we thought was good and realized it was bad. And so letting the group do what they do is pretty much my signature management style. And I think it's made me a lot better at doing what I do as a result.
Yeah, could not agree more. Leaning on the others around you. Obviously, you hire very capable people in this position, so that's very good to hear as well. Switching a little bit of gears towards the financial industry right now, obviously pretty changing, and it's a pretty interesting time. How do you try to balance staying true to your core values while driving innovation and growth within the company?
I've been very careful all my life to never be in a situation where my values are misaligned with the values of the larger corporation that I work for or the group within that larger corporation that I work with. My values were very much aligned with Nesbitt's, very much aligned with TD's, very much aligned with Fidelity. And honestly, that is crazy important. You can't survive 43 years out there if you're working with companies that have values that are tearing you in opposite directions. So the truth is, it's never really been an issue for me. All of those companies put the customer first. emphasize right over wrong. And those are the types of companies I think you want to work with. If you're in another type of company, it gets risky and dangerous. And then, trying to create enough innovation and enough growth, there's never enough. Doesn't matter who you report to, there's never enough innovation, there's never enough growth. But we do our best. We try to be innovative. For us, there's been a lot more reward in growth than innovation. Now, maybe that needs to change. Maybe we need to focus a little bit more on innovation than we have in the past. But growth has come easily for us in the last 20 years because our products are just so competitive in the marketplace that all we really have to do is bring more and more of what makes Fidelity special to Canada and make sure both advisors and investors are aware of it. And when we do that, we get growth. So the path to growth has been easier for us to pursue. And maybe that's why we stuck with growth via that opportunity rather than hardcore innovation. But as I say, I do get a lot of encouragement from my friends down in Boston to do a little bit more innovating. So hopefully you'll see more of that from us over the next 5 or 10 years.
That's super helpful. I know speaking from my experience with Fidelity, I was actually at the Fidelity Vision Conference last week, and it was super helpful to hear all the portfolio managers and panelists on stage speak not only about the growth, but the innovation they're doing within their pods as well.
I'm glad you came to that, Michael.
Building upon that, and the next question we had was, how did you see the financial sector evolving over the next 5 to 10 years within Canada in specific?
I had a hard time understanding the magic in social media 15 years ago. I'm not much of a Facebook user, but I did go onto Facebook 15 years ago to keep tabs on my children. Not that it really worked. As soon as they realized I was there, they became Snapchatters or something like that. I don't know. But in the last 5 years, I've come to understand the magic of social media. And I really do think that's going to be the big change. There's no doubt there's lots of technology that allows those of us that create portfolios, or more specifically, multiple portfolios, to trade them more effectively, more efficiently, in all sorts of fancy ways. But I think the real magic is in social media training investors to become better investors. We all think we know what we're doing after we become investors for a year or two, especially if it's in a bull market. But there's a lot of just science and art and discipline that needs to be learned to be a good investor. And wow, has it changed in the last 40 years. I grew up at a time where the only hope you had of getting any news, financial news, before CNBC, there was a channel called FNN, and I used to work, I think it was called the Financial News Network. I watched that 24 hours a day, but it was really my only source. Yeah, I read Barron's on the weekend, things like that. But it was one-way communication. It was experts talking to the world, and it wasn't necessarily aimed at me as an audience. So I would read it and I would learn what I could. But it's way different than YouTube and Reddit and Facebook and Instagram and all the stuff that's available to people now. And I think in the first 10 years of that, there have been some non-experts charading or parading or whatever they're doing as experts, pretending they know what they're talking about. And I think those people are getting sifted out of the system. And I think what you're seeing rising to the top, the cream rising to the top in the social media space, is investors teaching other investors how to be good investors and doing it in a very succinct way, doing it in a very positive way, doing it in a very helpful way. And oh my goodness, there's a generation of investors that is going to be way more informed as a result of this than all previous generations. And it's just going to keep getting better and better and better and better and better as social media evolves. So it's just amazing to me what social media is doing to help that next generation learn. And it's amazing to me what it does for a company like ours trying to get messages out. I mean, you saw us at Vision. Our struggle is to show people that we are a different investment manager, that we approach investing very differently than all other investment shops out there. But when we do it our way, we win. And getting that message communicated to the investor network in Canada, the advisor network in Canada, takes a lot of work, but social media has made it all a lot easier. So it's a magical thing that has evolved in the last 10 years, and it's just going to get better and better and better for all future investors.
Yeah, completely agree. I know one way I consume information, and Fidelity has one too, is the podcast.
Yeah.
I learn a lot through auditorial learning, and I think the Fidelity podcasts were a great example of a way you can get access to that information that maybe you didn't have 5, 10 years ago. So I completely agree on that. And then switching a little bit back to your career development as a person, also looking at the next generation of investors, what do you think the biggest challenges for professionals entering the workforce in today?
It's way more competitive than when I started. Oh my goodness, it's so tough for someone coming out of school now to get a meaningful job that gives them real opportunity to learn, to develop, to test themselves, to exercise the muscles that matter, and to make themselves eligible for promotion. So much tougher. I thought it was tough when I came out in 1983. I felt sorry for myself back in the day, but oh my goodness, it's tougher now. And the top 1% of students are just so driven, so eager, so organized, so well educated. To compete with them, really, really tough. But I think that's here to stay. And I think everybody has to deal with that and learn with that. It's a global world we live in now. It wasn't when I graduated. Everything was very domestic. In Canada, we competed with Canadians. In America, they competed with Americans, and so be it. That changed a lot in the last 40 years. And so young people have to be mindful of that.
And if you can give one advice to students coming out today, maybe to help them achieve to be that top 1%, what would that be?
Something I see that young people could do a little bit better. Now, they do a lot better at it than I did, or people from my generation did. But you really do need to be future friendly to survive and thrive and move yourself ahead. The rate of change in this industry is absolutely incredible. And it just keeps coming at us faster and faster and faster. And anybody that says I'm not comfortable with this next piece, wow, they fall off the conveyor belt and they never really get back on. And so you have to worry about that. I mean, I joke about this example all the time, but I became what we called back in the day a stockbroker in 1986. And in 1986, here's how it worked. I had pink tickets on my desk. I had blue tickets on my desk. I had a pencil. And I shared with three other people a Quotron. It was on a swivel. We didn't have computers, we had terminals, and we couldn't afford a terminal per person. So you sat in a pod of four, and this Quotron machine swung around. And if you were lucky, every now and then you'd be able to get a quote from it. But you'd use your rotary dial phone to call out to customers and you'd hope to get an order. And if you did, you took your pencil and you write it out either on a blue ticket or a pink ticket. You took it to the wire operator. The wire operator took that or wired that order down to the floor of the exchange. Somebody used hand signals once it got to the floor of the exchange and traded with somebody else via hand signals. Then they sent a wire back to the branch that had submitted the order. Then you would get a paper confirmation that your trade had been successful. And then, yeah, we did have computers, and there'd be a computer printout every night that would come to us and tell us what trades we did yesterday. And you had to check that. That was called a trading blotter. And you had to reconcile that with what you thought were your orders from the day before to make sure everything you hoped to get executed actually did get executed. It sounds ridiculous now, but that was only, 39 years ago or 40 years ago. And change just came rapid fire. And I'll tell you, I saw a lot of people saying, no, I don't want to do that. No, I'm not interested in that. And they just fell by the wayside. But I think it's going to be harder and harder and harder even in the next 4 years. I think technological change is coming at us faster than ever before. And as I say, you don't have the luxury of saying, no, I like the way it used to be. I want to stick with that. You've got to be future friendly.
Yeah, could not agree. And one of the topics that I heard in Fidelity Vision Conference was the investment in the AI sector within the company. But as an internal organization, do you have any opinions of the team using AI, and do you see AI as a big technology mover in the next 5 to 10 years?
AI has helped us in a lot of places. There's no doubt about it. The impact it has had on us in terms of advertising has been enormous. We were being a little bit future unfriendly maybe 7 years ago. We were still advertising in newspapers and in transit shelters and on billboards and on radio and in television. And we were starting to get curious about this thing called AI-enabled targeted advertising. We saw other companies do it, and we were all getting targeted ourselves. We found these mysterious ads showing up on our internet pages and on our phones, and we didn't know how they were finding us. But fortunately, one day we were all down in Palo Alto, and we went to see Adobe for a day,
Mhm.
and wow, did they wake us up. And we went there actually to learn about a company they just bought, a service they just bought called Marketo. So they gave us about a 15-minute tutorial on Marketo, and then they sat us down and said, look, we know how you advertise, and you got to stop doing it that way, and you got to start doing it this way. And we'll tell you, any company that we've dragged through that knothole, they never go back. Once they learn to do advertising in an AI enabled way, it's just way more effective. You're way more successful, way more efficient. And at the time, our P&L was such that we could finally afford it. A few years earlier, it would have seemed very expensive, but at the time, it was really only about buying $2 million worth of systems and hardware. So what did you have to lose? So we did it. And I remember thinking at the time, we don't have any employees that know anything about any of this stuff. So I hope the ones that are going to test drive the new machinery are eager and smart and driven and figure out how to drive it the right way. And fortunately for us, that was a great team that we handed it to. And I think we're now miles ahead of any competitor using artificial intelligence to do advertising in the asset management industry in Canada. And so, yeah, that's been a huge source of competitive advantage for us. So we're really excited about it. And we're thinking that AI is eventually going to do a lot of other things for us. It's done a lot to help us become better in back office operations, become more accurate, help us with audit, help us do reconciliations, help us do a lot of things. But so far, the big uptake has been in advertising, and we are looking forward to it doing other things for us in a major step forward kind of way as well.
That's super helpful. I know personally, when thinking about the capabilities of AI, it's super hard to pinpoint all the potential use cases in 5 to 10 years in the future. It's really hard to know, but yeah, I think it's really cool what the companies, especially in the asset management space, are doing it with it, both from an investing and internal operations side. And then
Yeah.
on your career, when looking back, is there anything you would have changed if you could go back? I know obviously you're very successful in the position you are today, but would there be anything you could have changed or would have if you could go back?
hmm I spent 17 years in the dealer world, and now I spent 22 years in the asset management world. I wish I'd spent fewer years in the dealer world and more years in the asset management world. The asset management world, it's just a richer world. The companies that are successful in asset management are very rich companies, and they get to nurture their employees differently. That dealer world, margins are pretty skinny, and it's a tough environment, and you're on your own, and you got to figure out how to move ahead. Not like that in the asset management business. So yeah, I wish I'd come out of school and straight into the asset management business if I had it to do over again.
Yeah, that's super helpful to hear. And the next question I had was sort of geared towards Fidelity's involvement within the school specifically and the DeGroote Finance Investment Council. So obviously, they've helped partner with the DSB Balanced Fund with our school investment council, DeGroote Finance and Investment Council, DFIC, which has been pretty instrumental in all of our junior development and really helped a lot of us place into the asset management and finance industry in general. So my question to you was, from your perspective, what do you think the long-term value is of giving students real capital and real responsibility to work with?
Okay, well, I got 1,000 different responses to that question. We might run out of time. So I'll tell you my own little journey on these investment clubs. Wow, have I learned a lot. So, as I said, when I went to Laurier, I was really just hoping to learn about investing. And the closest I got to an investing course was in first year. And the course wasn't about it, but it had this side tutorial thing that you had to take. And it was about investing. And they had this thing they called the stock market game, but it was ridiculous. You had to pick a portfolio of five stocks. I don't think you could put more than 25% in any one stock. And whoever did the best job with their portfolio over the course of 2 semesters was deemed a winner. But again, there was no technology. So you sat there with a piece of paper and a pencil, and once a week you were allowed to rebalance your portfolio amongst your five stocks and reweight them. And some poor teacher's assistant had to take all of those pencil scratchings away and calculate the value of these portfolios. It was just crazy to watch. But I learned lots from that. So I was very thankful for that. And I watched a lot of other people learn lots. So then, if you fast forward about 25 years, I went down to see the dean at Laurier. And I had two ideas for the dean that day: teach more about investing and teach more about selling. And before I could speak, I was lucky I didn't speak up first because he said, Rob, I want to show you the brochure for our investing school. I said, okay. So it was an 8-page brochure. And on page one was a Fidelity portfolio manager. And on page two was a Fidelity portfolio manager. And on page three was a Fidelity portfolio manager. On page four was a Fidelity manager. I think in the 8-page brochure, there were six portfolio managers. And I hadn't realized this before. I knew they had all gone to Laurier, but I went and talked to them afterwards. And I said, how did you guys all get so good at investing? That's absolutely amazing. And they all said, we went to Laurier after you did, Rob, 10 or 15 years after you did. And there was this wonderful professor there named Brian Smith. And Brian Smith was really the first professor in all of North America to use the new technology to create a stock trading game. And that was our favorite thing about going to Laurier. And in fact, we were all in the investment club together and we all worked together, different years, but we learned together and we learned more about investing in that club than we did in all the rest of our university academics combined. So I became a real believer in the power of these clubs. I watched my daughter go through the exercise of finding out what school she wants to go to. And is it Penn State that's down there at College Station? I think so. I think we went down there, the two of us together, because she got accepted there and she was thinking about going there. And somebody had just given that school $100 million, so they built a nice new building for this business school. Walked in, the first floor was like 25-foot ceilings. And in the middle of it was this big glass dome on the first floor. And we had this personal guide for my daughter and me. And I said to this guide, I said, well, what is that thing going on over there? And she said, ooh, that's the investment club. She didn't know who I was or anything. She said to my daughter, she said, if you come here, Claire, you really want to get on that investment club because you know what happens in fourth year? Companies like Fidelity and Goldman Sachs, they fly down here just to interview and hire those people. So you really want to get on that investment club. So we looked in the glass window of this room that day, and what was being taught was exactly what I wished I had had an opportunity to learn when I was in university. There was a whiteboard in front, and there were 21 people in the classroom, 21 students, and they all had their own Bloomberg. I mean, I'm 64. Nobody's ever given me a Bloomberg yet. but they all had their own Bloomberg. And the question on the whiteboard that day is Microsoft overvalued or undervalued right now? And they were all answering that question. I thought it was the greatest thing. Then I drove home with Claire and I said, Claire, that's a pretty good school. Do you think you're going to go there? No, can't go there. I said, why can't you go there? She said, you saw that classroom. I said, yeah, I thought it was the best classroom I've ever seen. She said, 21 guys, no room for a girl in that classroom. So that really struck me. I thought that was a little bit odd. And then funny, we were doing a lot of work with investment clubs all across Canada. And I got back to the office the next day, and somebody had just done something with an investment club out in, I think, Victoria, BC. And they sent me back a picture of the investment club. And once again, it was 21 people, all guys. And so we decided at Fidelity that we were going to do something about that, that we wanted to sponsor investment clubs all across the country. We think that's just the most practical way of people learning to invest and learning to collaborate to make decisions about investing. And that collaboration is really what leads to the learning. And so we've worked it out with a lot of different schools around the country. And we try to incentivize those schools to make sure there's equal opportunities for young men and young women to learn. And so where we participate, we always make that one of the conditions. And I think it's helpful. I can also tell you about my daughter's experience when she finally went to Queens. She didn't go to any of those U.S. schools that she had applied to. She went to Queens. And I remember her saying, I got to find a way to get onto that investment club. And then about 2 days later, she called me. She says, I've got an interview this afternoon. I think I got a shot at getting on the investment club. And I said, well, call me back later in the day to let me how that goes. And she called me later in the day. She said, I don't think I'm going to get on that investment club. I said, well, why not? She said, well, they only had one question for me. They asked me, what do I think are the five primary determinants of the price of oil today? I said, well, how'd you answer that? She said, I don't even know what the price of oil is today, Dad. I said, no, I don't think you're going to get on that investment club. But somebody else had had a similar experience to that 5 years earlier and didn't get on the investment club. And their father was wealthy. So the father phoned down to the school and said, here's a $500,000. Create another investment club. Make sure my child's on it. And so that club still goes today. And Claire got on that club. And I'll tell you, she learned more about investing from that club than she did from the other 4 years that she spent at Queens. So I'm a huge believer in the power these investment clubs have. I'm a huge believer in all the different ways they make students learn. I'm a huge believer in the collaboration they create and the learning that comes from that collaboration. So, yeah, we're big fans of investing clubs at Fidelity, and we keep sponsoring them at a lot of different schools. And we're very proud to be a participant in the one at DeGroote. And we're very excited about the progress we see that club making.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. A lot of good content there. And again, just thank you on behalf of the Group Finance Investment Council for allowing us to play with actual real money, because I think it also raises the stakes and helps us teach the young generation who take our place. So that's super helpful. And again, thank you for that. Maybe switching a little bit over to some fast fire personal questions, but personally, I grew up playing competitive sports, and I think it's important to have someone who you idolize and look up to. From you, when you were a young stockbroker, was there anyone who you looked up to, both from a professional aspect as well as a personal aspect?
There are a few people, a nice story about all of that back in my day was that day when I was 13. I think there were like six stockbrokers in Guelph, and I got it in my head that I was going to buy some stock that day. And I went to five of them, and all five of them said, no, you're 13. It's illegal. You're not allowed to buy stock until you're 16 years of age. And I thought, well, I hope this next guy does, because I don't want to have to hitchhike all the way over to Kitchener to figure out how to make this happen. And I walked into this guy's office, lovely man, worked at Pitfield Mackay Ross. He was a big, tall fellow. And I told him what I wanted to do, and he looked down at me. He said, how old are you? I said, 13. He said, well, I'm not supposed to do it for you. I said, yeah, I don't really care about that. He said, but you know, someone did it for me when I was 13, and I've been thankful ever since. So I'm going to do it for you. And he grew into quite a mentor for me. We had a lovely relationship for a very long time. And he taught me a lot about investing, and he really took me under his wing and he helped me out a lot at a very early age and really shaped a lot of how I think. So that fellow had a lot of impact, but I'll tell you, it's hard to narrow it down to one person because over a 40-year career, you meet a lot of people and they influence you a lot of different ways.
Yeah, completely agree. Even in my university sort of collegiate career so far, through the 4 years, there's so many people you meet and so many people help you in different ways, and everyone's trying to help you. So I completely understand it's hard to narrow it down to one or a few people. The last question I had for you today, Rob, was again personal one, but was there any hobby or interesting fact about you that you did that maybe not a lot of people know would be super interesting?
I fish with my son. I raise
Okay.
bees with my daughter. I plant trees. So I've got all sorts of other weird interests, but now mostly I'm a pretty straightforward guy.
That's helpful. Where do you fish or where do you like to fish?
Well, my son at the age of 5 decided we were going to be fishermen. And wow, did we fish a lot of places. We had a boat down here at the Boulevard Club, so we fished in Lake Ontario a lot. We also have a cottage up on Lake Huron. We fished there a lot. But we did a lot of vacationing all around North America, and the family got dragged to a lot of fishing spots. And so we have fished in many, many, many places in North America, even a few places in South America. And there's been a lot of wonderful places we fished, and I've had a wonderful time doing it with my son over the years. But I think one of the things we learned over all that time was there's not many fisheries on the planet quite like Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario is a pretty easy place to go catch fish. So we did a lot of it there and we had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I've tried to take up fishing a tiny bit. I definitely have to check out Lake Ontario. But yeah,
Well,
thanks
and the
again.
Niagara River, the upper Niagara, the
Okay.
lower Niagara, very, very fertile fisheries.
Yeah, good to hear. Definitely check it out. But again, thank you so much, Rob, for not only sponsoring the DSB Balance Fund at the DeGroote Finance Investment Council, but taking the time to interview with us today. And again, big congratulations for receiving the award.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to do this. And thank you for all the good leadership you're showing in that investment club.